very aware of what is your vision in your life. What's your moonshot? What's your North Star? It changes over time, but I think you have to have some clarity about what exactly is your vision. Even if you want to put it right in front of you every day to have an affirmation of what's your vision and where you want to be. Because no matter what happens or setbacks happen, if you have your North Star right in front of you, it's like a direction. Of course, sometimes there are deviations. That's okay. But the light needs to be there, We have to be very strategic and intelligent about how we seize your opportunities in a crisis. If it's a down period where it's lull, what can we do in terms of innovation? What are some of your skill set that you could test at this point?
Thrilled to have Nisha on the show today. Nisha is a multifaceted personality, from being a tourism practitioner to academician to corporate trainer, and now currently wearing her new hat as women empowerment leader. Fresh from the launch of her new book Undefeated, it's my pleasure to have Nisha on the show.
Shrikant, very happy to meet you and have this conversation with you. A little background of myself. I am from the travel and tourism hospitality industry in Singapore. I've been there for about 2.5 decades now. And my passion is for the service industry. I love working with people. I love working with the travel trade. So I have moved up the trajectory from corporate travel to leisure travel and then to the meetings and incentive sector of my industry. And based on my experiences, I have now moved on into consultancy work for the last 1 decade as well. And my work takes me into tourism development in many beautiful parts of the world. Primarily, if you look at countries like Bhutan, South Africa, Sri Lanka, some of the countries which are also looking at not only tourism development, but moving it in a more sustainable tourism development versions of it. And that's where my passion is. I'm an academic, so I teach at Higher Educational Institute in the area of tourism and hospitality management as well. And in the last 1 year specifically, my work has also been in the area of women empowerment and elevating the status of women in the tourism, hospitality, and events industry. So that's my background.
Nice. Thank you so much. Nisha, lovely to have you on Inspire Someone today. Thank you for joining me today. So, Nisha, you have been a tourism practitioner, as you call it. And I loved one of the statements that you made is the universe is made up of stories, not atoms. So tell us about your story. How did all of this start up?
Tourism has always been my passion. And while we started off in Singapore, where tourism actually peaked over the last 2 years. So I saw the really good times here in Singapore. However, there has been several crises that had impacted the tourism industry a fair bit. And that's when I guess my opportunities actually came. So while I was a practitioner, my first, I would say, the door opened to the training and consultancy work during the SARS period, when tourism was almost zero at that point. That's when we needed in Singapore to train people to take service to the next level, train people to develop themselves. So I was asked to come in and develop curriculum, train my industry. And that was my breakthrough, I guess. And I started to develop, programs and started to work into human capacity building. And I thought I loved it because I have been a practitioner for some time. And I felt that was a time that I needed to develop people for my industry because I'm so passionate about it. And that led me to training and development and human capacity building in other parts of the world because Singapore, has been able to transfer best practices and service standards. So I was able to do it internationally, but also cross-sector. So I was bringing the best of our service from hospitality to healthcare and hospitals and the finance industry and other service sectors. So it was interesting that I was cutting across sectors and also cutting across to other parts of the world. And because I was moving to various parts of the world, I was observing their best practices. And I was like a conduit, I guess, from Singapore to other parts of the world, other parts of the world back to Singapore. And it expanded on my consultancy business. And I was also, I think, at the right time taking or seizing the right opportunities. Whenever there was a crisis, I found that I was opening my doors through looking at other forms of work. At the same time, I was also into my own self-development. So at every time there was a crisis, I had actually moved on to doing my further education, moving on to my master's, and then I did my PhD during these down periods. And sometimes when you're at the right place at the right time and you seize your opportunities, and that's when you make breakthroughs. So when I finished my master's, there was a time for practitioners or what we call pracademics, practitioners and academics. And I came into the right time to also bring education of tourism education into the higher educational institutes. And Singapore was a educational hub, and many universities came here. So I started to lecture at the degree level and master's level. And just when my consultancy business was picking up, I was also moving into my PhD journey. And I completed my PhD journey just in the smack of COVID. So I always, when I hindsight, I look back at my journey, my breakthroughs were always during crisis, So I think that's what makes me actually.
So that's very interesting. So you're made for crisis. You're the person to go to when crisis hits the industry.
Whether I would say that, but I think we have to be very strategic and intelligent about how we seize the opportunities in a crisis. If it's a down period where it's lull, what can we do in terms of innovation? What are some of your skill set that you could test at this point, And self-development, I think it's an absolutely amazing time for self-development. And by the time a crisis sometimes is over, that's when you finish your courses or your development work and you get ready for the next, I would say, wave of opportunities. Yeah, so I think that's what I have been doing, planning.
No, that's nice. You're always getting prepared for the next wave. You don't know when that wave will hit you, but you're prepared towards that. And talking about crisis and resilience, Nisha, I think the tourism sector has been the worst hit during the pandemic situation. And you have the bird's eye view of what's happening in this particular industry. So, what, according to you, or what are the stories that you have seen, or stories of resilience, stories of people wading through the crisis in your sector?
Well, during the crisis, I think we have noticed that lives and livelihoods have been really badly impacted. As you said, it's one of the worstly hit sectors and industry in the world. However, I am very positive, and I feel that slow is not necessarily a bad thing. We have been given the opportunity now to look at some of the mistakes that we have done in our industry. What I mean by that, I think we have gone into over-tourism, we have gone into many, many forms of unsustainable development. And what I've noticed is that during this period, we have gone a little slow, but it has given us the opportunity to think very carefully, rethink and recalibrate tourism development. I mean, even UNWTO is now saying that sustainability should not be, it should be the new norm. It's not just a niche forms of tourism, but it should be something that we should adopt in all our practices. So what has been successful is that I have noticed many companies now taking a look very seriously into how we could focus on sensible forms of tourism development. I have more people talking about how can we look at high quality forms of tourism development. Maybe we should move away from being a tourist, and how do we become more travelers or encourage more travelers? So I find that there is a lot more mental, emotional, and intellectual resilience surfacing. I've also noticed people moving into, in my industry, innovation, because we've been so busy that we have not really given enough time to look at innovation and innovative practices. So I love in some aspects the way we are moving towards high quality forms of tourism, sustainable forms of tourism development. I've also noticed that in my industry, people are moving towards more collaborations. So it's not very individualistic as it what used to be. I'm encouraged by people saying, come, let's collaborate. Let's try to see what we could do together. And that's a good thing because we are a highly interdependent, interrelated, sector. And it's very difficult to see us as being individualistic, and we are beginning to see the interrelationships and connections between the human ecosystem and the physical ecosystem now. We are getting aware of that. We are mindful of that at the moment. To me, all these it can be very intangible, but this consciousness is very positive, and I'm quite encouraged by the developments that is happening very subtly, but I am nevertheless very encouraged to see that there is these groups of people, stakeholders who are moving towards the right direction. Whether we are going to sustain it when tourism picks up, it's again the challenge. It requires other stakeholders to come together and say, yes, we want to move towards this direction, and whatever we do at the moment, I would say is going to be a pathway, and it's going to be an imprint on what is going to unfold. So for me, I see things positively at this point.
No, it's interesting. That's very encouraging as well. You made a very nice point saying that as the world opens up post pandemic, we got to see this whole space not as tourists but as travelers. To
Mm-hmm.
be a lot more responsible travelers than just being tourists out there. That leads me to the next point. You did touch upon innovation happening in the tourism sector. So
Mm.
definitely want to hear a couple of things around what and how it's happening.
Mm.
Secondly, I think the tourism and the hospitality sector has always thrived on service excellence.
Mm-hmm.
How do you drive this in the DNA of organizations and also in individuals? So, what can we do to make this as our personal standard of service excellence? Any thoughts around that and innovation in the sector?
It is not something that passion drives service. I would not say that. As a trainer myself, I've been doing service training for the last 2 decades. I always tell people that service, there's an art and science behind service, and the science is something that we need to know, and we need to understand it completely, and we need to consciously train people in our industry. We need to put our resources into it. We need to put money into that. It is not something that we say, let's take people with magnetic personalities and put it into our trade, But I have been to countries where I love the hospitality of people because it's just natural in them, very natural. If you look at the Bhutanese, they are so naturally beautiful people, However, when I go in there, I think what they really needed was someone to polish. So all I do is, I go there, I do a touch up, I polish them a little bit, raise an awareness of high standards across the world, some of the science behind understanding human nature, and people who come into our industry, they're seeking an experience. So I teach them what is really creating memorable experiences and all that. And the moment I train them, they become extraordinary service people. So I feel that while we know that the service excellence should be in the DNA of our organizations, many organizations don't consciously do that. They don't consciously train. They don't consciously put this DNA service blueprint in there very carefully, monitor it. This is something that we need to take very, very seriously. So in Singapore, for example, I noticed that every time there's a crisis, one of the things that our government, specifically Singapore Tourism Board, puts resources into is to do service training. So I did service training, a very, very heavy, intense service training during the SARS. It was every day, every organization, from McDonald's to Coffee Bean to the hotels to the tourism attractions, they were all asked to send their staff for service training. And they took it really, really seriously. And then there were a few other crisis points that we did service training where the government put in money. And now, during the COVID, we are doing the same thing. We know that events are going to open up, and we are putting our digitalization into process. We are putting our risk management framework into process. But we are also very conscious that despite having all these, procedural dimensions, we need to have the personal dimension too. So we have put our resources and money very seriously into developing service mindset and service skill sets among every single staff in our MICE industry, events industry. So it's very serious. We are giving the certification, we train the people, and we tell them that you have to send your staff for that. So there must be certain level of commitment certain level of seriousness, to put the resources in there and to ensure that there is compliance. People comply to that in your country. And if that sort of dedication is done, then you can take your organization as well as your country to a different level when it comes to world-class service standards. Yeah. So it is not something I would say it could be done so easily. No, it's not something that just happened randomly or by default or accidentally. No, I would think that it's very strategic. You've got to be very smart about what you're doing and putting the right resources in the right place.
So it's a process. While you can have a service excellence mindset, to get to that point is a process.
Exactly.
And as individuals, how can one develop the service excellence mindset? What are 2 or 3 traits that you would recommend to have a service excellence mindset?
When you talk about people on the ground, to have this service excellence mindset, I think number one, you have to have a passion. That is really critical, to have a passion to be in this industry, have a passion to serve people. So I would always say, while you can have the hardware and the software in your organization, your skill sets, but it's also the hardware, your heart must always be in the right place, right? So I always say this to service staff: have the passion, have your own service vision, where you want to take yourself when you want to deal with people. At the same time, have a continuous learning, learn what's the science behind serving people. What are the skill sets that you need to acquire to be able to serve people effectively? Even if you can communicate really nicely to people, but there is what we call cooperative language, right, in service. So using the right language will avoid you getting into trouble, will elevate people's experience. So there's a science behind it, and learn that as well. It's not good enough to have that passion and personality, but what are your skill sets? Like a carpenter, equip yourself, and also know there are new trends happening when it comes to service. We are in an experience economy today. So what are the skill sets that you need in an experience economy? Understand that. The mind shifts have happened amongst our consumers as well. What they want today has also evolved. And that's part of service. Understanding the psychology of your consumer is also service, right? So understand, learn what is going on. So knowledge is power. As service people, how do you determine and how do you gain your confidence as a professional? Knowledge.
Yeah, great points. I think it's just not passion. Yeah, passion is important, but if you don't back the passion with knowledge and learning, it's not of much good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And Nisha, you yourself have been a trainer, an entrepreneur, change maker, educationist. I don't know what else I have missed out here. So I wonder, how do you manage time given multiple roles that you play?
Okay. That's an interesting question always. I think one of the things is that you have to have a positive mindset no matter what. For me, I think that drives me all the time, But let me just put this in a way that it becomes more systematic when I answer. Whatever that has driven me and allowed me to expand my capacity, I have put this into a program called the Asian Women Leadership Program. It comes a lot to do with my journey as well, which I find becomes critical for women as leaders, women as entrepreneurs. So one of the things is that crisis management and resilience is important. When I say crisis, it can come in, it doesn't have to be the pandemic, but a mindset of resilience is very important. So when my dad passed on, that was a crisis to me. And how do I manage that? It is important because otherwise setbacks can just push you down, and sometimes it'd be very difficult to kickstart and things can look negative. So a crisis resilience or a resilience mindset to me is very important. The second thing is also to be very aware of what is your vision in your life. I think, what's your moonshot? I always say that, what's your North Star? It changes over time, but I think have to have some clarity about what exactly is your vision. Even if you want to put it right in front of you every day to have an affirmation of what's your vision and where you want to be. Because no matter what happens or setbacks happen, if you have your North Star right in front of you, it's like a direction. To me, at every point in time, I know where I'm heading, of course, sometimes there are deviations. That's okay. But the light needs to be there, The third thing is the moment you are aware of your vision and your purpose, you are also able to prioritize your life. There are many conflicting demands. You could be a wife, you could be a mother, you could be a daughter, you could be an entrepreneur, you could be an employee. There's so many demands and challenges in your life, And how do you balance this? It's very important to learn to prioritize. Otherwise your plate gets overwhelmed and full. You are stretched everywhere. You get stressed out. So priorities, what's really urgent, what's important, what's important at this point that you want to focus on. So when you learn to do that, it relieves you of unnecessary demands and challenges, and you have a bit more clarity. And as you are able to do, like I say, lifelong learning is very important, saying it to yourself, this is not enough. I want to be, continually learning. So I believe in this thing, of an intellectual feast every now and then, while we feast on our appetite, go to restaurants, but to keep your mind engaged, to learn from people who challenge your paradigms. And that brings personal mastery in different aspects of your life. So personal mastery could be in the area of your knowledge. Personal mastery could be in the area of your skill set. Personal mastery could be in the form of self-awareness, So looking at certain mentors, your networks. I am a firm believer of networking, relationship management, relationship, like Keith Ferrazzi would say, the relationship action plan, right? So I draw my own relationship action plan, and I plan very carefully who I want to spend my time learning. It could be a virtual learning. It could be a one-to-one learning. Who is the one that you want to look at people's lifestyle and say, hey, that's the healthy lifestyle I want to lead. Or somebody who is into mindfulness, and I say, I want to do something like that. Who aspires you? So I think I need that inspiration, and I need that aspirations in my life for personal transformation. And finally, how much do you allow yourself to influence others? And how do you allow others to influence you? Because you are always interdependent in this ecosystem, and that makes you who you are. So I took some time to answer this because it's not something that's just ABC sort of thing, but it's a amalgamation of so many factors that allows you to continually develop yourself, to where you arrive. So knowing the destination that you want to arrive, things can happen along the way, but if you have your moonshot with clarity, prioritization in place, and your continual transformation as you move on, I think we can all do it.
That's a very interesting perspective to have that vision, have a moonshot, go behind that moonshot. And along the way, I'm sure it's not going to be a smooth sailing. Any advice out there? How do you kind of overcome these hiccups? Or any personal examples that you had a roadblock, and how did you overcome that roadblock to achieve what you have achieved?
Yeah. Obstacles are there all the time, In my journey, I would say the pandemic has been a major obstacle in February because I worked so hard to arrive in January this year with businesses filling up my calendar all the way till December. I was so excited. But February first week, I was devastated, looking at my calendar, and everything had to be wiped out. You could literally pull out all the pages and throw it away, But what actually built up my resilience is, number one, I'm very, very positive a person. I think that's really important. So I said, okay, let's see how I could take opportunity of this, right? I can't allow myself to go down. What presents me with, what's my control? Circle of influence, I call it. What allows me to influence at the moment? What's beyond my control? So what I could really influence is that I had certain opportunities. My networks were there. My connections were there. I had my years of experience, my expertise. I was always passionate about doing something for women, and I said, okay, why don't I take opportunity of this and focus on that? So sometimes when your purpose is beyond you, it's more than you, it's larger than you. You forget about whatever that is beyond your control, whatever that you are confronted with, So for me, I started to focus on something that is beyond me. The larger purpose is women, the tribe in the tourism industry that I've been frustrated with. I've not been very happy with the trajectory of women and the visibility of women in my industry, as well as in academia. I said, why don't I do something about this at this point? Yes, I have to compromise my lifestyle. I'm not going to make money out of this, but that's okay. There's a bigger purpose at the moment. So I put all my energy and my efforts into that. And I stopped planning and chasing. And I think the moment you stop planning and chasing what is meant for you and what your heart desires, will gravitate towards you. And to me, I was desiring that, to do something for women. And it gravitated towards me. My networks gravitated towards me. My opportunities gravitated towards me. And in just a matter of months, I've started moving ahead with World Women Tourism. It was a network intelligence platform for women, and we started taking it forward. And we started in 2 months doing 5 webinars across Asia. And we reached thousands of women, and we managed to speak to very prominent women in terms of their policies and what they would want to do with the tribes of women in the various respective countries, And we started doing master classes. I started my Asian Women Leadership Program and starting to coach 20 other women. And it's amazing that things just happen to you, And initially, I just wanted to maybe contribute a book chapter on women. And but because my intention was there, I somehow got the opportunity to now become a co-editor of a book solely dedicated to women.
Wow, that's interesting. Nisha, we are also celebrating this month as International Women's Day. This couldn't have been a better coincidence than to talk about two key topics, one about women empowerment and the book that you're co-authoring.
All right. Okay. So the first is women empowerment. And there are 2 initiatives. One is the World Women Tourism, and the other is She in Tourism. And of course, the Asian Women Leadership Program falls under the World Women Tourism. So the idea came about because, our industry, the tourism industry is, majority of the labor force is women. However, the socio-economic trajectory of women has not been ideal, right? So small, medium enterprises, although women own it, they don't scale it up to the large establishments. Procurement between women-based companies or women actually going out there to procure for businesses have not really been happening to a level that we desire. While women are climbing up the ladder, they don't go up to the management level as much as we would like to see. So there are percentages and research out there to show that. So I looked at why this is so, and largely, I think one of the reasons is where there is a need for skill development, capacity building. There's a need for intelligence, resources in terms of research, intelligence in terms of knowledge, sharing, but also at the same time, network. I think that's one thing that men do quite naturally, but it doesn't come as a priority to women. So networks are very important in business, very, very important, as we all know, even in terms of our careers. So the network intelligence platform, the World Women Tourism, is a space for that. We want to allow women specifically in the tourism, hospitality, and events industry to come on board, network, share resources and our intelligence, possibly move into its procurement. So we want to give more visibility to women in the tourism industry and help to elevate the status of women in our industry. She in Tourism is more specific to Asia because I think, especially in South Asia, we see that there's a need for more help. And therefore, it focuses very much on women in South Asia. So we have been doing a lot of networking, masterclasses, and webinars and so forth as well. Although it is at its infancy, but very, very positive and very heartened by the number of women who have joined us in just the last few months.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and we have moved forward. So we are taking the dialogue further. We are moving around in our dialogue and conversations across Asia. And we are very happy with the progress. And the Asian Women Leadership Program, again, has been a milestone. We managed to put that together, something at the levels of, I am daring to say this, at the level of Oxford and Yale and their program for women. We are doing the same thing, but in Asia. But we have adapted it to the Asian context. We have made it, less, of course, not Eurocentric, not Western-centric, and not male-centric, So something I would be very daring to say, well, I think we are the best at the moment, the only one doing a program like this for Asian leaders, and that has taken off. We have the first cohort and we've just completed it, and such fantastic testimonials that we have received from these women. I'm really positive that this would kickstart more conversations. I'm happy to see more groups, opening up in similar to ours, and we can all collaborate. We can all partner. There's enough space for so many of us, right? So that's my Women Empowerment Initiative. And because I was doing this work and I heard of so many stories of women who are resilient, and there's so much to learn from many of these women, like our conversation, what about putting it into a book? What about people who miss this conversation? Can they read something about it, So I thought my vision initially was just a chapter. And then I started talking to people and I said, could we put together a book? Because I'm a professional speaker, right? And I said, okay, why don't we get women speakers to put their stories together into a book so that we could go to corporate organizations and speak about this stories. We could motivate and inspire women in corporate organizations with these stories, We could give away this book to people who want to read. And nice, and people said, yeah, why not, Nisha? Let's support. It was a man who said, let me support this. From Start India, Ashutosh, and he says, let me support this. And through that, we got women together. And then we decided to call this book Undefeated. So yes, I think this is also partly a story of my life, undefeated. So we want to put stories of resilience, put stories of being visible, intentionally visible. I love to use this word, being intentionally visible, right? Because the research has shown that women are intentionally invisible. They want to be invisible. And the book chapter is on being intentionally visible and stories of showing self-love as well, So a collection of over 20 stories of women in different parts of Asia and Australia as well. And we'll be releasing it.
Nice. So Nisha, for everybody listening to this, if they were to reach out to you, if they were to get a copy of the book, what's the best place for them to do so?
Certainly, we will share the information with you.
Nisha, as you know, the World Economic Forum is having its meeting in Singapore in early 2021. And if you were given a chance to have a billboard message, what would that billboard message of Nisha would look like?
Wow. For me, it is always about providing the space for more women's voices, making more women visible. So definitely that would be my message to women, to step up, to be more intentionally visible, have your voice, and inspire through your work.
Great. What would be your Inspire Someone Today message to all the listeners out there?
For me, I always feel that before you inspire others, inspire yourself. Inspire yourself, challenge yourself, inspire yourself. Live a life true to yourself. I mean, imagine what would that be if it's your last day? And what would be that life that you could live that is true to yourself? And if you could live that true and honest and authentic to yourself, then I think you are an inspiration to many people. Because many people don't have the ability to exercise that, don't want to exercise that. And it's a very uncomfortable position if you are not able to do that. You get demotivated. So I feel that if you could live a life true to yourself, honest to yourself, and authentic to yourself, that's already an inspiration. And if you feel inspired by yourself, you look at the mirror and say, wow, I'm inspired, And it's really easy to have that positive energy and that positive outlook and to inspire others. You do that with ease, And to me, I think that's my inspiration.
Thank you for listening into today's edition of Inspire Someone Today. It's been a privilege to bring in these conversations. If you like this episode and have any feedback or comments, do mail me at inspiresomeonetodaypodcast@gmail.com. Inspiring someone is like creating ripples around us. If you like what you listen, feel free to share them and let's create ripples of inspiration. Do not forget to follow me on my Instagram handle @InspireSomeoneTodayPodcast for all the latest updates. This is Srikanth, your host, signing off, and until next time, keep inspiring.